Hello everyone, it is time for Opus 20 Dawn of Heroes set review, one of my favorite parts of Final Fantasy TCG, and I am of course joined all the way from Japan by Mr. Eureka himself, Jared Wallace. Jared, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me on as always.
Oh, absolutely. I always love doing this with you. So today we'll be covering the first Fire, Ice, Wind. Just want to do a few housekeeping things. I tend to look at this mainly from a standard competitive standpoint. What I love having Jared on here for is they actually play L3 and L6 in Japan, so he can give a little more insight on those formats. But for me, you're mainly going to hear standard. I have not tested any of these, so I know Octagon is technically live, but I haven't had a chance, so it's pure speculation on my part. Jared, you have gotten to play with some of them, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I've played more of the set than I probably should have already.
Fair enough. Okay, so we'll have very different perspectives then. This will be good. This will be good. So let's get things started off with Fire. Mr. Arden, one of my favorite FF villains, and boy, if you like some random fun, this is the card for you. Gave me shades of old Opus 7 Agrius, although that one was, of course, limited to, I think it was like characters of 3 or less, whereas this is just, right. You know, for the effect it is, I love the wording. So you don't have to sacrifice the backups till resolution. So if they Amaterasu it, you don't lose your backups. And then they specifically say card name other than Arden, so you can't just hit another Arden and oops, oh well, you know, I kind of bricked myself. So you will get 2 other characters. Now, will they be characters you already have on the field? That's up for the fates to decide. It's a fun card. It's cool. It's always hard to see cards like this making any kind of competitive splash, but it is just fun and neat. What do you think?
It does have some of those Agrius vibes, and at the time, Agrius was like, everybody thought it was going to be like a, gotcha card, and then it ended up being like just like a generic good card with a really, really high deck building restriction, but it was still worth it because, you could blink it and stuff like that. I think we're kind of past these ones in my book, well, especially, from a standard perspective, the consistency of decks is really one of the biggest selling points in standard at this point, and this is like just not. I've like thought about like the ways you can try to build around this to try to Agrius it, cheat it, make sure you always get consistently kind of what you want, and the answer is just like, well, you still kind of have to just kind of get lucky a little bit, and the deck building restriction is like way higher than Agrius is if you try to build around it in a consistent way. So I'm not really seeing it. I know like Richie and some other folks were like really high on the card. They just think it's like whenever if you play a mirror match, the person who has Arden is just going to win the value game, and I'm like, right. Yeah, I don't really know about that one. Like, I'm not really sold on that, but hey, if when it does work, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. And big difference, too, with Agrius. Agrius could be put out onto the field immediately. Arden, you have to have backups first, so he's technically like slower in that sense. But all right, so a card I have my fingers crossed for this so much. This is Orin. I love this artwork. He's one of my favorite characters from 10, which is my personal favorite game in the series. At his best, at his absolute best, he is a 3-cost forward that draws you a card every turn and also theoretically prevents you a point of damage. At his worst, he's 5-cost, you damage yourself, and they like finish him off with a little Porum Ping or some other little thing they have, or they Typhon him or whatever. So like, he sounds so cool, and I love the theme of this, of that, he kind of protects you, that you can prevent that damage. But this is one I have to see. Like, I can't make a good, strong guess about it without seeing it in action, because again, I can see that potential, but then I'm like, but there's so many ways to like just get around cards like this. So man, I am so hoping for this card. What do you think of Orin?
It reads really well, right? And it works with a lot of the things that Fire wants to do right now, like Magisa, stuff like that. But I feel like every time that I am in a position to resolve this, I'm already winning the game. Like it feels like I'm when I need it to work, it just doesn't do anything, and then when it does work, I'm just already so far ahead that it doesn't matter. So I really want to like it, and I wouldn't be surprised if it did find a home eventually, but I just cannot figure it out. Like I tried splashing it in Wall because it comes in off of Yuna, right? Oh, yeah. It comes in off of Yuna on the damage effect, so like I tried splashing it in there, and just like kind of like, meh. You can ping if your opponent like passes the turn back, you can wall to like ping the Aron and like draw an extra card or whatever. It's fine, but I don't think it's gonna be worth the card slot in standard. Now in L3, it does look a little bit better because you already play Yuna in that deck in L3, and it does work with Warrior of Light, and the deck does need a little bit more power than it used to have, and a little more in the way of defensive options than it used to have, and Aron does help that. It's especially really, really good against the multi-element Y'shtola. So she'll damage the player, your opponent will take damage. You'll get the 4K in. They can't choose the Aron, otherwise it gets turned on. And then when they go in, then if you use the Aron ability, then the damage is negated, so they don't get another 4K ping, and you get the draw still. So you kind of get like a win-win situation with the against Y'shtola specifically, which is kind of a problem in L3 because we don't have like Pucha Lane or stuff to stop hasters. So once you get to 6 damage, you're just like you will die to Y'shtola eventually. But Aron does kind of shore up that weakness a little bit. So I can see it in like L3 Yuna decks, specifically wall, because you can just naturally cast it too. But outside of that, I'm hesitant to be optimistic about the card.
I hope he pulls through for us. Well, so this next one I have no doubts about, and this is our first of our hero summons. This is Ifrit. Just, pretty much the Opus 11 version, just minus the X burst, but at its bare minimum, you just blast something for 10k. Now, granted, you do have to control 5 or more fire characters, so if you're using this turn 1, it's only going to be, one of them. But presumably, if you're playing mono fire or whatever, you're going to have, that's not a high bar to hit, which essentially says, you can just take out a Warrior of Light, 10k, goodbye. You can split it up in Magissa. You can say, all right, I'm going to put 5 on my Magissa and 5 on your forward, and then this other thing will finish it off, or maybe it kills it. Like, the versatility is there that it's all optional as well. So I just can't. If Fire Burn has any kind of relevance, surely this card will show up there because it just seems awesome.
Oh yeah, this card is it's a slam dunk. There's no just 1 CP 5k, really pretty good in general already. Then you add on the fact that it can be at 1 CP 10k burn. It can burn your own forward. So yeah, Magissa, that's where everybody's mind immediately goes to when you see this card. Is Magissa. It's just it's so good for that deck. You have 5 fire characters on turn 2 in that deck a lot of the time, so it's already turned on. It's I've played a little bit of Magissa with it. It's great. I've played a little bit of Mono Fire with it. It's great. I think you don't even have to be Mono Fire because it seems like a pretty high cost, the 5 to get it going, but it works really well with Lulu already. It works really well with goblins too, so you don't have to be Mono Fire because if you just put a bunch of goblins on the board, it just gets online in a single turn. So I just think it's just generically very, very good card, cheap, good removal that we have been severely lacking from this element since Amaterasu came out, basically. So great card.
Expect great things for Ifrit. Next we have Warrior of Light, whose art looks very similar to another version he has. Oh, this one his horns are pointing up. I think the other one they're pointing out.
Opus 2 versus Opus 20.
Right? Yeah. In my head, I want in my head, I'm okay, I'll just put it out turn 1 when I don't have a good hand, and then he'll get me that backup that I can then cast, and he fixes it. In reality, he'll probably just, I don't know. These kind of effects just aren't for me because, again, they're just too high-rolly and unreliable, and there are so many reliable things in the game in Standard specifically that I just I never feel pulled to take a chance on cards like this when it's but that thing will do the thing I want it to do, so I'm going to go with that one instead. How do you see Wool?
I would not just go play him in every deck willy-nilly. Some people think that this card is really nuts, right? And I'm just no, I think it's just okay in Mono Fire specifically, basically. Sometimes you get a bad opener, especially in Fire when you don't have a lot of card draw. It is really a big weakness of the Fire decks. And so having this kind of effect is in between a search and a draw. Not quite as good as either, just in the middle, but sometimes it does the right thing. It's fine. I'll probably try playing a couple of these in Mono Fire, I would guess, because you want to build up the characters And 4 is a lot of cards to see when you get to cast any of them. You know, you're not. There's no condition on which cards you get to choose, right? So, like reveal 4, reveal 5 is kind of like a cursed mechanic when you have to add when you're adding one to your hand based on a condition. When you can cast any of them and kind of choose, it's pretty consistent, I think, in that regard. So I think it's a little bit better than some of the other reveals that we've had so far. As long as you run it as like, if you hit 3 summons and a backup, like, is that an acceptable situation? That's kind of something you're gonna have to think about when you cast this card. But in general, yeah, I like it, but it's just like a Viking, right? It's just like a 0 CP guy. Yeah. It's nothing super special in that regard. So
this next card, there was a young kid at a card shop, and he was playing mono water, and he didn't have any ash in his deck, and he said, "Mom, can I get an ash for this deck?" And she said, "Oh, honey, we have ash at home." And then this Garland showed up. Yeah, it's ash, but you actually have to pay full price for it the whole time. Like, I don't know what else to say about it other than it's ash at home. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe someday this card will come out for free. Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of. It's a draft card. You know, move on.
Yep. Next we have Blacksmith. Man, I've gone so back and forth on this. So I think the ability is kind of nuts. Like, all your forwards, again, no conditions. They don't have to be fire. They just forwards that attack. Every single one of them does 7k. I pictured, you put this in a 6 deck, you party attack. Suddenly, not only do you get all these other party triggers, boom, 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 you blast them. Avalanche, boom, 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 you blast them. At the same time, it's always been weird for me, these backups that like require you to have attacking someone who can attack that turn. And the other thing too is, it's not this card, it's that I was thinking about fire and like, I don't know, does fire have trouble burning? Like, does this give fire something it didn't have before? I don't think it does. So because of that, I'm kind of but I could imagine in draft especially, or like this is going to be like a blowout card. So what do you think?
Yeah, when this lines up in draft, definitely really good. In terms of constructed play, these kinds of backups, they tend not to work. Just like in general, you know, like if you are in a position where both players have a lot of forwards on the board, and then this one like just like lets you clear out your opponent's board one-sided, obviously like super nuts. It's just that like it takes a backup slot, it takes a slot in the deck. It's only good in like a very limited scope, and those kinds of cards just like tend not to be worth it in constructed, especially because like fire, a lot of the cards that you're going to want to play are enter the field, burn everything, or like burn one thing like really well. So like it tends to be difficult to find situations where both players have a lot of forwards. Either you're not going to have any forwards, or they're going to have no forwards in it, and it doesn't really lend itself very well to fire decks, like mono fire and like fire, you know, water, fire, or things that are just like dealing a lot of AoE or like enter the field and kill something. So yeah, I'm not really high on this.
Before the full set got revealed, I wasn't super high on this set as a whole and it seems like they were holding back a lot of the good cards, and this was one of the first ones I saw that I was like, well, hello, what's this? This is the Demon. Not a surprise to see him show up, because we did see the Goddess spoiled, so I assumed we were getting the Warring Triad, but man, oh man, what a cool card. Like, it took me a while just to get past his first ability, remove all their break zone, and then just blast something for as much damage as possible. Awesome. But then I thought, well, wait a minute. If you tried to do that turn after turn, like, well, you've dumped their break zone. You're not going to kid them. Oh, except you can just pick an element and blast every forward of that element for 7k, or name a job like, I don't know, Lassie or Samurai or Monk or Soiree, whatever is relevant, and just like, hey, and his art is so cool too. The art on all these Warring Triad are so good. Like,
Mobius,
dude, I hope this one isn't a disappointment, because it reads so strong and so well, and I just want to try it so badly. So I'm really hoping the Demon is as awesome as he looks in my head.
This card has just been great.
You've played it. Good.
I've played it. I played it a lot actually. I put it in Leo. I made a Jex. I made a Jex We're gonna get to Jex in a little bit, but I made a Jex Magic pot deck, and he comes out of Jex. So you know, there's that. I played against it too. It's very, very annoying to play against. He's category 6, so he goes in the mono 6 deck. There's also, I think, so there's the old lock, like where you play literally nothing besides 6 characters, but also the new lock, that will make new 6 decks. I think you can play either of them, and both of them are good. I'll get to that in a little bit when we talk about the ice cards, but he goes in that deck too, so for some reason now that deck also has Break Zone removal and AoE for like no reason. And this card has just been great. I think this is a card that's going to revive Mono Fire. I think this card is good for Magisa because he can target your own Magisa too. So you can remove your opponent's break if they have like less than 8. You can remove your opponent's break zone even if they have no board and just ping your Magisa every turn when it attacks. Really, that's been so. Usually, what'll happen is you'll Magisa, Alphanut, or Bosch search for the demon. Next turn, you'll play the demon. He'll ETB, and then you ping your Magisa, and then because the break zone has already, you play the demon, remove their break zone, kill their thing. And the next turn when he attacks, they'll have less than 8 cards in the break zone, so he can remove the break zone again, ping the Magisa, and start doing his thing. That's been really good too. Yeah, it's just been a great card everywhere I can play it, I think. And it's got Mobius, you can play it with the wall if you want to cheat it out or whatever, but you don't have, you can just pay 7 for this and it's just great. I think this card is like alone enough to like bring Mono Fire back a little bit. You can trigger it twice. You can Goblin. Because the Goblins are so good with that deck as it is, that you can just like deal 7k twice. You can turn 1 versus Vanille Hope. It works. It's at 8k sweeps. And then even if they start like zerging you out or whatever, like this triggers every turn. It's really good.
Fantastic. Oh, fantastic. So going along with the demon is Kefka, who I was so excited when I saw this because, again, I play the 6 deck so much, and I'm like, oh, it's Kefka in fire. Like, okay, I can put another 6 name in there. But then I read his effects, and while I do like his effects, I realized, well, wait a minute. If you don't have any Warring Triad, he's a black belt. Like, he legitimately doesn't do anything. So, obviously, you mentioned the demon is 6. They're all Cat 6. The demon is the only one that's in those colors naturally. If you have a single demon, then he at least gets a one-time 9k shot. Is that enough? I don't know. I was very excited because you fit in the colors, but I wonder how difficult it will be to actually line this up effectively. What do you think?
I'm basically in the same place with that right there, because the text reads great, right? It's just like I don't really want to play anything besides the demon in a 6 deck. We'll get to it when we talk about the Fiend and the Goddess, but like the Goddess, there's just like not enough win cards to play her consistently in any of the 6 stuff. And the Fiend, while you can play water, like the Fiend itself I don't think it's really that good. Like it's fine, but I don't think it's really that great. So it's gonna have a harder time making its way into the 6 deck. I suppose if you play Tricolor, then with the 3 CP lock. Probably not the 4 CP one because you're going to have to find some extra water backups and stuff like that. But if you do play with that, I think it could potentially work in there, but it's not going to be a 3 of. And, the text is really strong. It's hard to line up in general, and I'm not really sure where this is going to land. I would be surprised if we never saw it because it is just a really powerful card. And, the 6 decks are so full of junk that it doesn't really matter. A lot of the time, as long as you can discard the cards received, like the right element and the right name.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if we see less and less of it as time goes on, or if we see like 2 or 0 or 2 or 0, like depending on player preference and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Let's get to our second fire legend. This is Zach. Okay, so what you say about this card is going to set the tone for the rest of the set review because. So when you play this card, he doesn't do anything. You've invested 5 CP into just a body. However, anytime he attacks, he's going to deal 5k for every, or 5k total for every soldier you control. As long as you control a single soldier backup, there's an old soldier cloud, there's the restrictor. You're looking at 10k on swing, which is great. Other than that, most of the soldiers are Zach's, so you don't have a ton of options. However, and his special is obviously good, but specials are specials. His exit trigger is... I just can't even list all the possibilities his exit trigger can get you. Surely this fits immediately in Cloud Pod because he leaves and then you go get whoever you want, Aerith or Barrett or whatever, sets off your chain. However, it has been a common theme in Standard that effects that trigger only when they exit are not as, just aren't as relevant these days as they used to be. So clearly his exit is nuts. Is that enough? And is the on attack enough? Or is the fact that paying 5 for nothing immediately holds this card back? Jared, what do you think of Zach?
I am skeptical about the card in Standard. I would expect that most of the time when we see it, it's going to be in Cloud Pod. In L3, I'm more optimistic because the game is just generally a lot slower, and it triggers even when it gets, unit or whatever. It doesn't have to be put in the break zone. It can be put anywhere. So I'm really high on it there, especially because I think in L3, Fire Ice has been pretty borderline for a long time, but now with, Tifa Barrett, there's like a kind of a 7 deck that works with Axstar. So I think it'll be pretty good there too. Also, you're just going to have more time to make use of the on attack trigger as well. So I'm skeptical in Standard because what do you really want to do? Like, you want to Renoa it, I guess, but that's more Cloud Pod type stuff, and it's very difficult to evaluate these cards correctly because they're just so volatile. Either they do nothing or they're like really, really good, like Regis was kind of like in that way. It was really not a middling card. It was like, So I'm a little skeptical is the right word for this one. It could be, just totally nuts, but the fact that it doesn't really work and you don't play like Fire Lightning, but then Restrictor doesn't really have any like good targets in there, and you have Cloud, you have Angeal would be the big ones I would imagine that you would be playing there, but like if you're gonna play Fire Lightning, you could just be playing Scions right now. It's a very strange place to be, and I'm having a hard time. Like, I'll go to build a deck and I get to like 10 cards and I'm like, okay, and now what? Like, there's just nothing that I really want to do with it after that. So yeah, I'm not really feeling it for the most part.
I think that I love the way you said that it, the ceiling's out of this world, but it could also just crater. It's like this all or nothing kind of card. So next is a reprint, just the crystal backup. We'll skip past those. We have Jacked. You mentioned this. Okay, so same problem, right? 5 CP doesn't do anything, but when it dies, I thought of Braska's Final Aeon. I'm sure we all did. Oh, well, right? And that's thematic. And then the demon came in and said, scoot over, sonny boy. I'm here now. So maybe that's your 7 cost of choice. Clearly an incredible effect. The old Opus 10 Zondi, if anyone's still using that, he can pull him straight out of the deck. But again, he does have to die for it first. So sounds like you've played with him. Tell me about Jack.
Yeah, I had to get it out of my system. I needed a jackpot. So I played a Fire Earth version that used Bosch to get together the combo pieces, and then you play Jacked, you play Magic Pot, you sack the Jack to Magic Pot, and there's the deck. Now there is a specific interaction there where you Jacked and then Magic Pot. So Magic Pot will get the new Jacked, and then you resolve Jacked and you get the Philia, and then Philia blows up the entire board and Jacked. And then you trigger Jack to get the other Jack again, and you can get like Zandy or whatever. It feels so good. It feels so good to do it. It was great. So I actually, the first time that I did it, Philia blew up the whole board, got a new Jack, and then I got the Demon, and then the Demon chooses Philia, but Philia doesn't take damage, but I just removed everything that I killed. It was great. It was really, really fun, and I'm glad I got to do it. And I think it's really not that bad. The demon is just so good that like no matter how you're doing it, it's going to be fine. I don't think that Jacked is really the most competitive way to do it, but it is really, really fun. Now, this does come out of Yuna, again, like we were talking about with Oron, so maybe all 3, there's like a shot that you could play one of them, but there's so much in the way of Dull Freeze and stuff like that. It's just going to be difficult to resolve. I think if you're trying to play this card in Standard, you're fighting an uphill battle, but if you're going to do it, I highly recommend Fire Earth. I would do Magic Pot and then do like all of the fighting effects. So like I would do like Hecaton Chair and stuff like that. That's really where you're going to get most of your leverage out of Jacked, I think.
Excellent. Wow, that sounds awesome, and I totally want to do that as well. That's amazing. So next we have one of our 14 crafters. This is a goldsmith, kind of a little power crept version of the old samurai, although not a samurai, just a straight 3k brave to any forward when it enters. We're going to see kind of a theme this set too. There's a lot of just 2 CP backups that have effects if you want them, but also, hey, they're just 2 CP backups, which is pretty much, like the standard rate that you would want for your backups. So I like this one. I don't know necessarily where you're going to slot it, and surely it's going to be good in like draft and L3.
Yeah. I would imagine we play this in draft. L3, you got to look at the color combo, see if you have any, backup searchers, because obviously it's not going to be as good as those and stuff like that. But it wouldn't surprise me if this one pops up. It's pretty efficient.
Excellent. And then, okay, and this one, Culinarian. Okay, so there's one of these in every color, so we'll just talk about them all here right now. Yeah. There's these 2 cost backups. If you control 3 or more of their colors, so this one would be fire, then they essentially become free. So if it's free, you can never get mad at that. Where are they going to go? What elements do you think will fit them the most? I was thinking, obviously, wind, it's another free for the cast count, which is great. I mean, they'll benefit anything, but obviously you have to see them later. But I don't know, maybe you don't care about that, because again, at its worst, okay, well, it's a 2 cost backup that it just helps me build my board. So wind was the first one I thought of that, well, that adds to the cast count. What other elements do you see these going in? Or do you think maybe, I don't know, how do you see these?
Yeah, so I think I'll start off the bat and say that lightning and ice will probably never play, well, they not for the foreseeable future, not because they're not good, but just because those elements, first of all, the monos are bad. Like, they're just really, really bad. The monos are really bad. Also, they don't tend to play a lot of backups in the first place. When they are played in mono, they're the kind of aggressive strategy, so I don't think that those are very good. So for fire, obviously Magisa is not going to play this or whatever, but regular mono fire does want a lot of backups. You have effects like, they're a little old, they have like effects like rain, Ranjit, that benefit a lot from having backups. And also they just don't have a ton of like really super high quality backups. They have a lot of stuff that does the same thing, like, Red 13s and Ace, like all of these ETB burns or whatever, and they just got, backup searches for the first time, a while ago, where you have Geomancer, stuff like that. So I think that the fire one is pretty likely to be played in mono fire. Maybe not 3, maybe 2, maybe 3, who knows, kind of thing. But water is kind of the same thing, where you really need a lot of characters really, really quickly to make Ash online. And now that you don't have Sildra, you're gonna have to play more backups. So I do think like the water and the fire ones are pretty likely to see play. Earth, you want to get a lot of backups really quickly for Riku, but also I'm not really convinced that you want to play so many backups unless you're playing the Ignis. So it's kind of just a weird place to be, I think. And they also got, Miner, which is a new one. So maybe if there's a lot of backups, you might consider playing them in Earth, but I just have a hard time seeing Mono Earth outside of Riku be played in the first place.
Yeah.
And then I think Wind is obviously the best one. So Chocobo Sam gets you 3 backups, right? So you get Chocobo Sam, you get Fat Chocobo, then you get Chocolate, and then you play these for free. It's just, I think that's where it's going to be. And before, I would have said that, we would never play this because we have to play Althea. You have to play North Stalin and get Althea and save your space. Now, you don't have to save space for anything. You can do whatever you want. So I'll play, 3 Sand, 3 Nourish, Fat Chocobo, Chocolate, 3 of those guys, Stiltskin, Pavlov, Nash, call it a day. And if that's more than, 14, then I'll probably cut down to 14, or whatever it is. But, and then especially now that you have Bismarck back in the mix, because we're not going to play Althea, so Bismarck is coming back.
Yeah.
That's a little bit contentious, I think, for some people, but I think it's coming back. And so because you need the bounce. So when Bismarck comes back, bouncing 0 CP cards or negative CP cards is going to be the best bang for your buck. So, these are going to be great bounceable cards, and then you can just contribute back to the cast count. So, I think that this card is, or for Win specifically, it's great. Whether you play 2 or 3 or 1 or, whatever it is. I don't expect to not see it in the deck, but I would expect to see it in Mono Wind. Whether Mono Wind is really that good or not, that's going to remain to be seen.
Yeah. Great breakdown. Okay, so this next card, I'll kind of bury the lead. Some people seem to be like going nuts over this Tifa, and I just don't see it. So here's my thing with this card. First of all, it has haste, which is fine, but Tifa pretty much has built-in haste through Zengen or Barret.
Right.
And then it's the wording. So when a Category 7 character deals damage to a forward opponent controls, you choose a forward and it can't block. And it doesn't have to be a different forward, but I'm just in the scenarios in my head are like, well, if you're damaging one, then probably you're picking another one to not block. Like, there's a few niche situations I can think of, like the Elf Avalanche backup. You could ping something for 1,000 and then say, okay, now it can't block. But it's also called Tifa, and I love that dual element Tifa. I mean, not that we've even seen Avalanche this past set, but like that Tifa was already so core to that deck that I don't know. Like, I'm not feeling this one, so I don't know if you're high on it or not. Maybe you can sell me on it if you are, but what do you think of this Tifa?
I think that this card is borderline standard unplayable.
Okay.
I mean, I guess maybe if you're my only like way to save it is that, you know, Zach, Barret, which we'll get to in a second. These are cards that when you play a lot of like mono fire centric 7 cards. So I can see, you know, mono fire 7 is going to play this card because it says haste and it says 7, so, you know, it like works with the other cards, I guess. I'm not really feeling it. I would rather play good cards in my mono fire deck if I was going to do it. Now, where I do see this being really good is L3, because you're going to have Zac, which is going to be better. You're going to have Axstar and Barret, which is going to help you deal these small pings, and Tifa is going to help you put on pressure, and, you know, you want to have more 7 cards in that deck because you want the Barret to deal more damage, so I could see it in L3 being fine, and it's not competing with anything. It's probably the really big part is, you know, good haste that doesn't compete. But I don't think that this is really where we want the standard thing to go. And maybe I'll eat my words on this one. Who knows? Yeah. But
fair. Very fair. Well, Far Fall from Opus 16 for our friend Morrow here. Without Warp, it does absolutely nothing. I mean, I guess it's got haste. It's just a 3-cost 7.
Yeah.
Just Warp, it didn't ever really make quite an impact. And you'll see with a lot of these cards, they seem to really get away from the, hey, let's have them do stuff while they're warping. Like, there's a couple, but I thought they were going to really pump that up with the last set. But yeah, so this card just kind of nothing.
Yeah, I think this card would have been quite good if it was Warp 1. Yes. But, you know, Warp 2 is so far away, it's hard to imagine using it in Standard, but maybe, you know, like, and maybe in L3, if you can build Monofire in L3, then maybe this is L3 playable, you know, you gotta fill the slot somehow kind of thing, but, and, you know, the ETB is good, it's really, really good, it's just 2 is so long to wait for a card to come in that it's hard to imagine, but maybe.
Guess you never know. Barret, when I first saw this card, he looks like he just like let out a fart in front of the other party members, and he's like really satisfied with it. Like, yeah, that was great. It's kind of like a stronger version of the other Barret way back from Opus 11, and that one never really saw play because Barret tends to have good cards that you want to put out as forwards. But this one, that one counted characters. This one only counts forwards, although it does do more damage. And then that special, you get punished for using it by freezing him for some reason. I don't know why. I other than L3, I would be surprised to see this Barret show up.
Yeah. L3, again, like I said, it's a L3. It comes in off of Axstar. You know, it kind of works with the Zac and the Tifa, but outside of that, I don't think.
Yeah. Next, we have Palom. This was a bit of a surprise. Maybe it shouldn't have been with all the 4 cards, but so a new Palom. This one dealing with crystals. You're willing to give up a crystal. You can blast something for 8K. I mean, the 2 Amano Palom Porum are so good. And these compete with those directly, right? Because they're still 2 costs. I mean, their power levels are pretty relevant. And those ones just can still win games by themselves if they're allowed to get out of control. And the action ability on this one, too. You got to give up 2 cards, Palom and Porum. Right. So I'm losing 2 characters while you lose 1. Like, I don't know, man. I'm not feeling these ones at all.
I'm a little bit high after playing a 4 deck. I am a little bit higher on these just because I think that you can put this into not fire decks. Like, you can just play this in like Earth Water because you generate so many crystals. If if you have Rosa out, and Cecil's going to give you another crystal when you play this, that it's just going to be like basically a colorless 2 CP card. And I think in that regard, it's pretty fine. The only thing that I thought about the bottom text is that you can, like, if your opponent, Shantoto's you or whatever, you can put the Opus 9 Porum into the break zone, so you get your summon back, which is kind of like a cute little interaction that it has going for it. Now, there are like so many good Porums, and like that I don't really see that happening like a ton, but I do think that this is a potentially useful card, especially if you're playing it in like Earth Water over and over again with Forward Rosa.
Nice, fair enough. Here we have Phoenix. I would assume it's pronounced that way, even though it's spelled kind of funny. And my boy, the two-headed dragon, didn't end up panning out so well. He felt very expensive as a 4-cost, and milling cards off your deck just didn't feel as good. I'm hopeful for this guy because he has an entry effect, so it's essentially immediately nuke something, right. And I think removing from your break zone is, to me at least, it's a more interesting cost to pay. That being said, he is 4, which is a lot to pay, but he's also a monster, so he's untargetable. I right. want it to be good. But I got kind of burned by two-headed dragon, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's like, nah, it's just too much. What do you think?
I think that this one's a better than two-headed dragon on average for me. I think that this one will replace two-headed dragon in like 13 and like Monofire Luso and some. Well, maybe not Monofire Luso. We'll have to see that. But the entry ability is just much better than obviously what you're getting with two-headed dragon. Now, two-headed dragon does give a persistent threat that's kind of like a little bit different in terms of flavor, but I would just be jamming this at least. 1 to 2 of, maybe depending on how slots turn out. In all of the Mono Fire stuff, I think I'd be excited to play it in just like other random stuff too. Obviously, you don't want to eat your own break zone too much.
Yeah.
But Tidus, the Fire Tidus that we got a few sets ago, like that card is great at fueling this. It does compete a little bit with Ace, so I think I would probably lean towards like 1 of this card, but I think it is a really good deal for what you're getting, and especially in a deck like Mono Fire that doesn't really have a whole lot of ways to utilize this break zone, gets a lot of mileage out of this card.
Excellent. Folks, you like goblins? Have I got a bigger goblin for you? This is Hedgehog Pie. Tell your sweetie and she'll get him on demand for you. That's the first thing I thought of. Was like, oh, it's like bigger goblin. So if you're willing to pay 1 more, but you get a little more damage out, you essentially have the goblin effect. Now, granted, that the goblins are more versatile, of course, right? Because they can get backups and there's other goblins. The problem being with this currently, there's only this one Hedgehog Pie. However, like the goblins, if they print more in the future, this card could just get stronger and stronger. It's hard to give up the versatility of the goblins, and especially with the other Fireburn stuff we have, like the demon. Is the 2k difference going to matter? Like, do you need this 5 over what the goblins provided with 3? I don't see that, but it's a neat card, and again, it surely can only get stronger in the future if they give it more support.
I actually think this card is great for Magisa. That's really that is really what it comes down to. So you play Hedgehog Pie. So you discard 1, play a Hedgehog Pie, you're down to 4 in hand. You discard, get another Hedgehog Pie. And then you just end the chain there at 2, and then you discard 2 and play Magisa, and then you can Hedgehog Pie and get a Bosch or an Alphanaut or whatever. And then you also get to save another Hedgehog Pie for the Magisa next turn. So it kind of like, and then so like, let's say you got, Porum or Palom off of Bosch or whatever, and then you Hedgehog Pie on your opponent's turn. You Alphanaut, you get whatever it is you want, and then you Porum, or you have Palom, and then you can, search out another thing or, whatever you want. So you kind of get to save some Magisa triggers over the next couple of turns, and I think it's really, really good for that. Now, that being said, like, it is a little more expensive than, you're not getting a backup out of it like you do with Palom, the next card that we're going to talk about, Mont Blanc, and but yeah, I think it's kind of like the 1 CP bomb that we were kind of playing for a while there, but you kind of get to chain them out, and I think it's a little bit better for that. The other thing is, right now there's not a whole lot in the way of fire decks that want to play Chaos Arc, but if you did want to, this gives you a discard outlet for your extra cards when they're breaking you up. So, there's kind of a little bit of extra versatility in there. I wouldn't expect it to like replace goblins in like mono fire or any of like the normal fair decks, but I do think that for Magisa specifically, this card is a big upgrade over like bombs and like that.
Yeah, awesome. Next we have a awesome looking Mont Blanc. At first I thought this was just a straight like weird reprint of the Sid FFL from Opus 8, but he actually counted backups. Okay, this one counts characters, which again, a little easier to achieve, which is nice. He's a Moogle, so he can work with things like Sarah if you're doing Fire Ice, although of course it clashes with other named Mont Blanc. But Moogles, again, always a relevant job to have. So yeah, he's a neat little card. If you're putting him in Mono Fire, like I feel like you'd at least throw one of him in there.
Oh yeah, I think in Mono Fire he's probably like probably a 1 of, I would guess, but or maybe two. But in Magisa, instant 3 of. You know, he can target you on Magisa, so yeah. No, not a whole lot to say there. Great card.
Absolutely. And finally, ending our time with fire is Red 13. You know, I never like loved this character in 7, but I always liked him and I appreciated him. I love the entire Cosmo Canyon section of the story, and every one of these cards always has like a caveat on it. They clearly think that like a just a big body is like so worth it on its own that it has to have a downside. So you can't even put him on the field unless you have specifically a category 7 forward. And then if you have enough characters, he just gains haste. Like he's a 9k haster, which there's nothing wrong with that, but that's it. That's like I've got to jump through a certain hoop just for that. Yep. I don't know, man. Like I just don't get it.
Well, I again think this one is, you know, L3 material kind of thing. I wouldn't expect to see it in standard. Again, you know, someone proved me wrong. Maybe Avalanche really wants more hasters. I don't know, but yeah, that's about where I am with it.
So in Ice we have Alhenalim. I do like cards with repeated value and repeated use, but his body is so tiny and he's slow, right? He doesn't do anything. He's got to sit there a whole turn. But maybe in Draft or L3 he could be there, but I don't see it showing up in Standard.
Yeah, I don't even think we're, you know, like, it's just too low quality of a card to see play in L3. I think you're going to play in your draft deck because you need your own certain amount of ice cards or whatever, and it's fine there where nobody has consistent removal and stuff like that, but yeah, that's about it.
Yep. That's Armorer. We'll go past that. That was the ice version. Calbrenna, some awesome mono art here. I don't know if I've seen this before. This one is incredibly interesting. So you can choose an ability specifically, choosing a character either player controls, and then it forces itself onto Calbrenna, which is cool, and it back attacks in, right? So you surprise. Haha, Ace, you thought you were going to burn me for 10? Actually, you're burning Calbrenna. And then she kind of has a little revenge trigger where she'll get to punch something for 7. But she has to take damage from a forward for that. Like, I think I would like that a little better if it was just like when she's chosen by an ability, she automatically does the punch back, but specifically she has to be taking damage from the forward, which I'm sure they think is, well, you just block, right? It's a surprise blocker. Now I get to block and I trigger a 7k for something else. I don't know how to feel about this card because Ice already has Charlotte, which doesn't create a stack and just says, hey, you already have to target this card. So like, I always get excited when I see cards like this that they have these kind of shenanigans to them, but I don't know. I've never seen one really succeed either. For all the cards we've gotten like this, like I can't think of one that's like, what a meta staple that is. So I would love to be wrong about this, but I wonder if all its specificity is gonna kind of hurt it a bit. What do you think of our dolls?
Yeah, I played this card as a 1-of and like Ice Lightning Turks and stuff like that, and just like having, when you're playing an aggressive deck, having any type of interaction can just be backbreaking for the defender. So I have had a pretty good experience with Calbrenna so far. It's not like a 3-of card, I think, and you know, it's 4. You can cast it off of Rosa too, so there is some kind of like additional stuff like that. So what the other thing that you can do is, because it's 4, if you have Cecil, when you cast a Calbrenna, Cecil will give you a crystal. Then you can redirect the ability to Calbrenna and then use the crystal from Cecil to make Calbrenna unchoosable by targets, so you can actually fizzle the entire. So there's some like room for experimentation with this card and just like completely not ice decks at all. But if you're playing it off of Rosa, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of in between. I've just been playing it as like a 1-of and here and there, and it's just been fine. So I would recommend starting there, and if you think it's better to increase, go for it. But yeah, it's just a nice, useful, generic, good back attack. You know, it doesn't have to come in off of a backup, so it's not like totally telegraphed either. So yeah, good interactive card, I think.
Yeah. Speaking of back attack, we got a lot of that nice this set. We'll do another one, Juggler. If you want to live that turn 1 dream where you go second and before your opponent passes, you slap this down and ta-da, you snuck in a free backup. But other than that, there's plenty of other ice backups to pick.
Yeah, I'm not super high on this card, but it does have some pretty good value at surprising your opponent when it comes in with back attack with that big face screaming at you. That'll give somebody nightmares.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the art. It's a shame on Octagon it doesn't blow up at their face and then sinks back in.
That would be funny, yeah.
Another 2-cost backup. This is Edward. So it has an EX burst. Can't complain about that. And the condition isn't too hard to meet, I think. It's just choose a dull forward. So it does have to be dull, and then as long as they have 2 total dulls, it breaks it. But a full break, like on a backup, you just would play anyway. Again, I kind of was trying to think of this in I think it was the Goldsmith from earlier. If the condition lines up, awesome. But if not, I mean, you're just playing a 2 CP anyway. It's not like you had to invest 4 into this or anything crazy. So I really like Edward. Granted, I'm still so biased for the old Opus 5 Edward, but I do actually like this card quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed that this wasn't a Job King. That would have been really great for Claris, and then we would finally have 2 options for backup searching in Ice Earth. But I kind of understand why they didn't do it, and also I think that this card will be just generically good, probably in L3 more than in Standard. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Mono Ice or whatever played this in Standard, but probably not as much in like Ice Lightning because there's just so many good backups to choose from already, So it's a little difficult to slot. In L3 though, I think it's going to be great. I think it's really, really good at punishing. The EX burst is going to be really scary for 13 to play against. So I expect to see a lot of this card there.
Yeah, that's a great point. Next, we have my spoiler. Oh boy, this is Genesis. So I got to be disappointed by this long before anyone else did. And especially having seen the full set now, like, okay, why is the Warp 3? And he is the most expensive Warp 3. There's other Warp 3s in the set, and they all cost 1. You have to pay 2 for him. Like, to wait 3 turns to get a random discard, which is good, and 2 characters freeze. And I know you have a suggestion for how to make this card better, and I'll let you say it when it's your turn. For me, I thought if it dull and froze, then like paying 5 isn't great, but paying 5 for a 9k body to dull freeze any 2 things on their board, like I think that would be okay. I don't know if it would be standard playable, but I'd be willing to try that. But it's just a freeze, like I don't know, man. Like I was so excited because people were randomly talking about Genesis in the Discord, like, well, we'll never see him again because of like the copyright issues, and I was just sitting there like, oh, I want to reveal it, but it's not that great of a card anyway. So let's hear your thoughts on Genesis.
Yeah, my suggestion for this card was just like, if you're gonna make it like be a Warp 3 card and be like super expensive and not super flashy when it comes in, then like make it so that when a warp counter is removed from it, you choose a character and don't freeze it. Suddenly, I'm really happy to play this. Like, I would just play a warp that just has that, and eventually, like, take your time coming in. Like, who cares? It's fine. Don't worry about it, because then you could just warp it turn 1, and it would just be pretty good. So I was a little disappointed that it ended up being such a flop. I'm not like, why did it have to be Warp 3? Like, was anybody like so scared of what'll happen if we put this at like Warp 2 that it's gonna be like super good? It just kind of feels like Warp has just become super, or maybe it always was, super overcosted for what you're getting, and it's just, I get it, I'm getting a 9k for 2 CP, but like, my God, waiting 3 turns is a really, really long time. So yeah, I'm not in there for this card. I don't even think this is L3 playable, probably. I think it's a draft card. And even in draft, 3 turns later, if you draw this in like the mid game, you can be dead. Like it's just like so far away in FF. And I think I'm gonna go on a little mini rant here.
Sure.
In MTG, when you suspend a card in Magic, right? There's like a very finite amount of mana that your opponent is going to have.
Yes.
By the time like 3 turns is over, like if you suspend something in turn 1, well, your opponent can play a land turn 2 and then a land turn 3, and so they get to play 2 plays before it comes in. But, you know, like, in FF, you're just like, well, I'll just discard my entire hand and kill you. Like, it's not an option in Magic the Gathering. Well, at least in formats where suspend is a viable strategy. So,
yeah.
I don't know. I think that Warp has just been super overcosted in that regard. I've liked to see basically all of the Warp cards, maybe besides Estinian, obviously, because the Warp one.
Yeah.
All of the Warp cards could have just been a turn cheaper, and I think I would have been more excited to play all of them. So,
amen. Well said, brother. Sorry, Genesis, you got to go. We'll replace you with another 7 character. This is a Cisne who got a great backup so she enters, gets a Shuriken counter, and then you can remove it not only from herself, from any character. So if you're running with ninjas for some reason, you can turn those into character dull freezes. That's great. Or again, if you don't care about any of that, hey, you just play a 2-cost backup that you're happy to have, and then unlike Herdy, it can dull freeze anything and keep itself on the field. Like, girl, where you been all my life? Cisne's great.
Right. Yeah, and you searched off of President Shinra. I'm sure we've all figured that one out. But like, Ice Lightning, another backup searcher that just like suddenly got really good. And we never wanted to play President Shinra before now, but hey. You wanted to play it because Turks, and like, we got Reno and Ruta coming up and Rufus, and we'll talk about that in a second. But like, you know what this really needed is an option to backup search. Yeah. Just like, the icing on the cake there. So yeah, I've just been throwing assist in all of it. It's been great. You don't have to play like, I saw some cute stuff where it's like, we play Edge and we get more Shuriken counters. Like, no. It's like, just play the good cards and call it a day. It's just good enough by itself. And yeah, I've had a great experience. And especially, dual and freeze on a character on your opponent's turn isn't something we get to do a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I've had situations come up where I dual freeze my opponent's back. So my opponent activates their backup, they do something, and then I dual freeze in response to their ETB or their warp or whatever. Like one of their backups, and it basically pins that backup down for 2 turns because you don't freeze it immediately, and then it's still frozen the next time around. So you get a whole like 2 turns of pinning their backup down. And it's really, really strong in that regard. So yeah, good card.
Well, since it was a good 7 card, I got to punch you in the face with a bad 13 card from your favorite category. This is Jill Nabat. I do like her first line of text. I was really hoping we'd see more stuff like that throughout this set of mono support. Hey, control all of the same element, get some cool effects. Again, I have to reference what we said earlier in Fire about cards that only get effects when they go to the break zone. This is Jill. And which it would have been slow regardless, right? But for some reason, like, why do you have to pay 2? I don't understand why you have to pay 2. I mean, again, 2 dull freeze on a character's is good, but you have to wait for her to die, and then you have to pay an additional, so you're paying a total of 5 for that. Like, ugh, I just don't get it.
Yeah, I can't defend this one. It's not even playable in titles. Like, it's just, it's not good in draft. Yeah, I'm not.
So I heard you like title. When we saw the new Lock Legend, I saw the 4-thing party attack. I was like, you'll never get that off in 6. You don't have enough bodies. Unless they print something that lets you color fix. Well, sure enough, here's my party color fix. And here's Setzer with some fantastic art. So yes, this is exactly what you want for all your 6-party shenanigans. It lets you form a party with any element. And then, for some reason, that's all I was expecting, but it was like, no, hold on. There's one more thing. If you party, go ahead and dual freeze a character on your opponent's board.
Right.
Like, what? So if you do Old Celeste, 2 things party, Setzer dual freeze 1, Celeste freeze those 2 as well, or pull something back. Like, good gravy, and it's a beautiful full art. Like, legit, the only problem with this card, and I'm gonna sound like a broken record because I'm gonna say the same thing for all the 6 characters we're about to see, is that damn, the old backup Setzer was kind of good because it was one of the few EX bursts in the deck, and it didn't have a ton of recursion. So I do hate to lose that, but oh my gosh, like, this card is just so cool. Good.
Yeah. I thought that this card was just like, oh, well, they just gave us a new Setzer, like, whatever. We're going to play the old Setzer. I played against the card, and my opponent was playing Tricolor, and he was just like, okay, party. Deal your opponent damage with lock. Soul freeze a character, party. And I'm like, whoa, this is actually pretty good. Like, I was just like, because you could just like ignore it. So like Strago is like partying with Sabin or whatever. Yeah. Like, it's just like doesn't matter, So yeah, I actually was really, really low on this card, and then I played against it, or like I thought nothing of it, right? Played against it, and I like totally played like, well, this is the Setzer I think that we're gonna play from now on, and I think we're gonna like, as long as you're playing the 3 CP lock, you're going to play this Setzer, and that's for sure. You know, if you're playing 5 CP lock, or I mean, if you're playing both, you still probably play the Setzer, but if you're playing 5 CP lock instead of 3 CP lock, or like only playing like, you know, 2 locks or whatever, then maybe you're going to play the old Setzer, but it's still not clear, I guess, is where I am with the card.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. All right, well, Setzer's got to kidnap Celeste, so here she comes for us. Celeste gives our lock haste, also has haste herself, if you control lock, she has haste herself, and then essentially like a mini Bahamut Zero just comes in, and there's no way it's not going to dull your opponent's entire field. Like, I couldn't imagine a scenario where it doesn't just dull everything in, and then they can immediately go in together. And I mean, again, the card is good. It's going to be the same thing, but the Opus 16, or was it 15 Celeste? I think it was 15. She is so good too. Like, that name clash. But this one gives the haste, and you go, like, that's my only, well, which one do I play? Well, maybe you play both. Maybe you play a little of both of them because they're both that good. Like, oh man, cool card. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this one is better than the old one, by a pretty significant margin. Now, you still might just play both, like 4, 5, maybe, but I kind of lean towards probably like 3 of this, 0 to 1 of the other one. Obviously, it's going to depend on what the 6 build is looking like. Are you playing 2-color? Are you playing tricolor? Are you playing, you know, like stuff like that? I think you'll be more likely to play multiple copies when you have a smaller pool to choose from.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're playing tricolor, I have a hard time imagining you're not playing anything besides 3 of this. So, but yeah, great. Very straightforward. We're still with a lock. We'll get to in a second.
And then we have Soldier 3rd Class. This is just, they're just kind of pack fodder.
Yeah,
I don't have much
it's
to say
pack
about
fodder.
this.
Yeah, yep.
Then we have Cerulean Drake, who I pretty much dismissed. The only thing I was thinking about, but I mean, this is kind of a best case scenario, is like, by him being there, you are technically threatening that, hey, any forward you attack with, I could just kill it, like, kind of on the spot. But beyond that, I don't know. Is that really enough to warrant a slot for him? Especially when you have monsters like Biblos and Scale Toad. I just can't see that happening.
Yeah, I think that they needed to print an ice monster, so they printed an ice monster. So
check it off the list. Ching! All right.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, Terra here is designed how I would expect a 6 card to be designed, which is that for some reason she has kind of some weird restrictions, whereas Celeste and the old Celeste and the new lock can just see anyone party. Same with the Setzer. Terra specifically has to be in the party for her trigger, which is just kind of strange. And then you can cast a summon for free, but again, if you're playing like the Oops All 6 deck, other than a few new additions we got, which are out of color, like, it doesn't really have any summons anyway. People often don't play those summons because of the lock. And it's still just a 4-cost Terra that gets a summon back. And this summon's even restricted, right? It's 4 or less, unlike the old Fire Terra, right? That could just get any summon. Or even the backup Terra. So, like, I don't know, like, why this one feels oddly over-designed, whereas the other stuff seemed to have, like, a freedom to it. What do you think of Terra?
I think they were pretty reluctant to just make a really, really versatile ice backup recursion, summon recursion card. I think that was kind of the design space for this one. Also, there's the whole, like, well, we want to encourage the party attacking there, so they give you an option, but they didn't really want you to cast like a bunch of summons off of this, it kind of feels like. So they kind of like gave it a little bit of extra flavor text that, sometimes it'll do some work for you. But obviously, like the thing we wanted to cast the most, Soul Drop, gone. Yeah. And, with the Realm or whatever, you want to play all of these, cheap summons, and then she wants you to play value summons. So I don't really think that this one is, you're supposed to party and get a bunch of value off it. Sometimes if you cast, a unicorn or whatever for cheaper, then, that'll be cool. The place where I really see this coming up is going to be the 3-color version of the 6 deck, where you play water too. So you'll have Realm, and because that one doesn't have to play the 5 CP lock at all, you can just ignore it completely, because the 3 CP lock lets you play, non-6 cards too. So you get to play summons, basically. Mm-hmm. That's where this one is really going to come up. in my opinion. And in there, I think it's good. You know, you can recur Amaterasu or Unicorn or whatever it is. So like, it's going to be good there, like period, I think. But yeah, that's about all that I have to say about this one.
Moving on. There's a reprint of the Crystal backup. Move past that. Here we have number 24. I remember this guy. I believe you fought him at the top of the Magi Tower in 6, or he used a similar character model. So I'm kind of biased towards this one. Just one, it's another 6 card. It's another unique name for the 6 deck, and it is worse. He's just a 3-cost 9K, but I kind of like his little barrier effect. That, and what I like about it is it says any damage. It's not like from an ability. It just says, hey, if he takes damage, you protect him with the barrier. So you can just run him into somebody, and then if they trade, you know, well, I lived and you didn't. Technically, he has a downside if he gets to 3 barrier counters, but I feel like at that point, you're just going to be swinging in with him anyway. I don't know if we'll even get to that point.
Right.
I really like this guy. I don't know. Like, again, I'm kind of looking over him like, is there something I'm missing? Some like, aha, here's the full drawback of him, but I just kind of like him. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this goes in all of those, you know, random 6 decks. Obviously, it's 6, you know, reveal it with lock, blah, blah, blah. Everybody knows that part. Yeah, I don't really know what the bottom text is about. Like, kind of, I guess they didn't want it to be a infinite blocker kind of card for, like, Ice Earth or whatever, but it's just weird. You know, it's just weird, bizarre, kind of. So, yeah, 3 CP, 9K, obviously, you know, great stats and everything. I don't know what to make of it. Like, every time I I put it in the deck and then I play to the field, and when I'm playing the 6 deck, it's like, okay, yeah, he's a 3 CP 9K, cool. And then if I play it outside of that, I'm just like I don't know what to make of it. It doesn't feel like overwhelming, but like, how many slots am I willing to spend on a guy who's just really big?
Yeah,
you know, maybe at some point, like against aggressive decks, like being really big is just good enough, but I don't know what point that is. I don't know if ice is really the element that needed this, if it is, you know. So just weird card. Not sure what to make of it outside of just like, well, yeah, put it in the 6 deck.
So, of course, after Genesis let me down, I was like, I need a hero. And we got a hero in Jared, spoiler. So he knows all about this card. This is Mateus from Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. Yeah. When I first read this, my eyes bugged out of my head. I was like, you can do what? But then I kind of started seeing it as whole, oh, wait a minute, it removes afterwards. And it is just freeze, not dull and freeze, which I think makes the forward part of it worse. However, for the backup part, like, surely you can freeze their backups, and I think you had commented in like the Discord too, is like, well, thank God it removes itself, otherwise you could just permanently freeze their backups the whole game with, you know, like a Lulu or some other summon loop. So I don't know what to think of this one overall. Surely you have tested with it since it's your spoiler, so I'm gonna let you take the floor. Hit me with Mateus, sir.
Yeah, I immediately just put this on like every aggressive Ice Lightning deck. Just plop a couple of them down. It's been great. Like, it's just, I think, you know, you don't want to, when you're playing like a slow control-y, like Ice Lightning, kind of like the way that it was played in Japan last season, where you're like, Weiss, discard you know, Faceless, draw a card, and like Lightning, dull, and, you know, not as good. When you're playing like, you know, Turks, that's when like this card is like, when you're like, you're turning your card sideways, you're getting the job done. That's when this card is like really, really good. And it's been great. I think if you're playing the 3 CP lock version, this card is immediate slam dunk for that deck. I would play it there. You know, it doesn't work with Realm. That's fine. Also, if anybody's not clear on that, it does not work with Realm. It's just like, just remember, it doesn't work. Just don't worry about how. Just remember, it doesn't work. We can explain it later if you need us to. But it doesn't work with Realm. But it's just good. You know, just like sometimes buying that turn, you know, pin down 2, 3, 4 backups, it's just really, really good.
Yeah.
And I think people kind of underrate how useful that effect is. And I'm pretty high on the card. I've played with it, and whenever I'm playing that aggressive deck, just great.
Fantastic. I can't wait to try it out. What about Mr. Wicked Mask here? I just realized he's really kind of the like the mirror for Calbrina, because he works with summons. They're both from 4. They both have this back attack. So you can choose a summon targeting a character in any zone, and then kind of redirect it. So first thing I thought of was like, oh, okay, so like they Fenrir, they try to bring back Sarah Mobius, and instead I say, bring back Sophie. Well, wait, I wouldn't want to do that. But Steve D actually said in his video that, like, I like the idea of someone, Asura, is, I'm going to get back my Luso, and you say, actually, you're going to get back your Chocolate, or something goofy like that.
Right.
Similar to Calbrina, though, it's very specific, so I love the idea of shenanigans, but this one I'm going to have to see in practice. Like, how truly effective is it? How much can you really mess with them? Or is it like, it sounds better than it ends up being in practice?
Yeah, I think that this one is like an anti-fire card specifically. So like a lot of fire summons, they deal damage to anything, right? So you can say you wanted to deal damage, you wanted to Ifrit my like 7k down my whatever. Well, now you're gonna kill your own dude, or that's like, I think that's how you're supposed to use it.
Yeah.
Or you can use the other big one is like Ramu and like stuff like that, right? Where you're like choosing exactly like one thing. That's, well, I guess Ramu doesn't do, well, but you get the idea. Like he's kind of like lightning summons, these breaks and stuff like that, or Blyce the Gigas, you know, like stuff like that is going to be really good. I guess the other thing is it is very, very funny with Chocobo. So I've already had it where like my opponent is like, you know, like has Rosa Luso and is like doing a loop or whatever, and they chuck up with a Luso, and then you play phase, and you're like, well, bounce the Rosa. It's like, oh my god, it's like a total, yeah. It is very, very funny for these kinds of things. How many do you realistically put in a deck when it's just like kind of like a funny card? I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised, you know, Nagmalata searches it. You don't obviously want to telegraph it because it's a back attack card, but, you know, maybe if and when we kind of get to the point where the meta has shifted and we know that there are, like, we have the primary meta and we know that there are some summons that we're going to be hitting with this card.
Yeah.
Then we could, you know, like put 2 of them in the deck and figure out what cards we don't need for that meta so that this card fits in. I would not expect out of the gates for this card to just be like, boom, you know, like just play 2 or 3 of them and like whatever ice deck you're playing. I expect it kind of slowly creep in to these kinds of ice, lightning, and 6 decks maybe. Or maybe, again, this is a 4 card, so you can play it off of Rosa. So maybe it kind of creeps in with like the Rosa decks, especially because when you have Cecil, you get to protect all of your stuff from abilities, but not from summons. So, you know, maybe this card helps you kind of protect yourself from some of those summons as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's get to those Turks we mentioned from earlier. So first is Rude, probably the most underwhelming of them. Kind of has a restriction on it, which, I don't know, did that really need to be there? Maybe. And then he's just a simple dull freeze on entry. Again, I don't put too much stock into their specials, although maybe Turks is the place their specials are a little more relevant, because I feel like some of them want you to really load up on the Turk names. But yeah, anything to say about Rude?
Yeah, so I've played a lot, like the first deck that I made, because it's so easy and brain dead, and you just put a 3 of all of the cards. It's very, very easy to make the deck. But was Turks Ice Lightning. I actually don't play any Turks besides Cisne, Rude, and Reno, because I think that the rest of them are bad. But yeah, I just play those 3 and Rufus. But it's been great. I do think out of all of the between Rude and Reno, I guess. Yeah. This S ability is the best one. Yeah. Very, very easy to get a forward duel, and when you do, just that break is super useful. So this one is Rude is kind of the anti. So Rude and Reno are kind of the anti-aggro side of it, and they kind of put on the pressure. So you get 2 forwards for 4 basically, because Reno gets it out for free, and then you get to dull freeze a forward, so that kind of lets you push the aggro, or push your aggro, get the tempo out. And then we'll talk about Rufus. Rufus is more the anti-control and anti-mid-range side of the package, I think.
Yeah. Moving on to Rufus, he's the one right there. When I first read this, I missed that it said enters or attacks. I thought it was just entry, and I was like, well, that's underwhelming. All that for a one-time effect. I was like, oh no, okay, you can repeat it over and over again. Versatility is always a good thing in competitive standard cards. Of course, the dull freeze, the discard, or you can just keep recurrent Turks back, which does let you feed that special. So if you wanted to do that. I wonder if the 4 cost versus 2 cost matters to you at all. And it sounds like you've played it, because he's a lot more appealing as a 2 cost 7K than a 4 cost 7K. Tell me about Rufus.
Okay, in terms of the cost, you want him to be 2 cost, obviously. Sure. But you need to bite the bullet and say that I'm going to pay 4 for this card more often than not. That's just the way it works. You're playing 3 Rude and 3 Reno and 3 Rufus. Chances are you're going to draw 1 Rufus before 1 Reno and 1 Rude are in the bin. Yeah. That's just like the way it's going to. Especially because if you have the Reno Rude and you're Dull and Frizz in the Brax and stuff, the way that those 2 are going to die is not like, they're going to get swept by Titan or whatever. They're going to get Totoed, you know? So like that they're not going to end up in the bin in the first place. So you're going to pay 4 most of the time by the time that he comes out. Obviously, you get later into the mid game, you get towards the end game, he's gonna to eventually. That's a really nice plus. All of the modes are used is the other big thing. So your opponent,
ask you which one,
yeah. All of the modes are used. This is one of the best enablers for Weiss at this point. Before we were using 4 CP Lightning to the multi-element one to like manually discard one, Orphan and stuff like that. Orphan is still good, don't get me wrong, but this is just way more cost efficient and versatile with what you're doing. And it does stuff when your opponent vomits their hand onto the board and doesn't have a hand anymore. It's not just discard, right? So I use this a lot of the time. I think my second most used is to recur a Turk, so I'll often just pitch my Cisne really early and then get it back later with Rufus, or get back Rude for the S ability, which happens a lot, and occasionally I get a Dull and Freeze. But yeah, most of the time it's just going to be I'd say 60% of the time is a discard, 30% of the time is get back a Turk, and 10% of the time is Dull Freeze and forward. But yeah, all of the modes are used. It is a 7K, but we'll take it. It's just been great.
Awesome. It's nice to have an Ice Legend with some versatility, so that makes me really happy to hear that. Well, we got to finish it off with Reno, of course. His main job is you pay 3 to get him in, you pay that 1 extra so he has haste, immediately go in, bring out the Rude, knock out whatever forward we're out of the way, and then you're off to the races. I mean, he pretty much just does what he says. I'm assuming it works really nice. What do you think?
Yeah, he does exactly what he says, and this is like the real shining card of the 3. I think Rufus is great, don't get me wrong, but I think Reno is just it's so much tempo, it's so much pressure. The bodies are so big, you can kill the Rude if you want, and he'll just come back out next turn. It's very, very simple, and straightforward in that way. That the Rude is always going to be there basically, and yeah, I think this card is just it's great. If Rufus is for me maybe an 8 out of 10 card, Reno's a 9 out of 10 card. Simpler, but it does exactly what it says, and you just want to do it every time.
Yeah.
So
awesome. Well, big thumbs up for the Turks. Let's end Ice with our other Ice Legend. This is Locke, a card that I can say one negative thing about it, and that's the name, because the art is beautiful. Right. It's got an EX burst. The entry effect is great, and then the party attack is party attacks have always had this issue that you're technically losing out on damage, but Locke says, no, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and make that up for you. And then, God help you, if you get to that, you got the returners coming in and you just boom, explode the board. I'm going to be jumping in my seat doing backflips. Again, it's pure gold and gas and a Category 6 card, except it's called Locke, so you got to, what do? Do you run them all? Do you pick which one? Do you pick your deck? That, but you know what? It's a good problem to have. Jared, hit me with Locke.
Yeah, I'm huge on the card. I was pretty low on the card until yesterday when Octocon came on and I started playing against it and a couple games with it, and I was just yeah, this card is sick. Like, it's just, yeah, I was really like, but like how often are you really gonna party or whatever? And then, but when you have Setzer out, it's really easy. Like, yes, you lock Celeste and you party, then it's whatever. The real thing is you play like all of these dorky little bodies, your Stragos, your Sabins, your Mogs, your Realms, whatever, and then the instant Locket hits the board, all of those suddenly are like really threatening cards. You start taking like a ton of damage, and your board is threatening to get wiped. And it's just, it's hard. It's hard to just fight against this card and how consistent it is, and it has EX burst to boot. It's just, I think that this card is a lot better than the 5 CP lock. I don't even think it's close at this point, in my opinion. I would, and because you don't have, you can play as many of the 6 cards as you want. Like, really, you have 25 if you want, and that's going to be more than enough. But like, I would play like 30 some probably, and then you can play your Amaterasus. You can actually have. You can have Terras that do something, like they're not just like random 6 cards. You don't have all of these
slapping Vargas and all those other guys.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You don't have to have all these garbage cards and have all these restrictions in your deck building, because Lock will just fix a lot of it for you. So I am pretty huge on this card. I would be really surprised if this doesn't make a splash. Now, I'm not going to say for sure that this deck is like best deck of the format, or tier 1 or anything. Like, it's just too early to tell. But like the deck, it works, and when it works, it's good. So I would expect to see a lot of this.
Sounds like he unlocked its potential. All right, going on to Wind with one of the sexiest images of Brother I've ever seen. Like, this character always looks kind of goofy in the game, and he just looks like a stud here. He's got a guitar. I don't remember that part from the game. Shame his effect isn't as great. Like, there's nothing wrong with it, but again, standard playable? Nah. Probably great in draft, though, or L3.
Yeah, it's just hard to get a Riku in L3 is the problem. So I don't actually know where we're really supposed to play this card. It's obviously good when it resolves, but are we actually going to play it? I don't know. I could maybe see like one of it in the wall deck specifically, because you just already have so many 10 characters. You have your Waka, your Lulu, your Buddy, your Len, and stuff like that. So, and obviously in Tidus and whatnot. So maybe he could be like a backup activator in Wall in L3, but even then, it's still maybe like one of. We'll have to see. It kind of overlaps with the multicolor Van in that deck. The Fire Wind one that activates all your backups when it comes in, or deals 5,000. Kind of does the same thing, but the Van gets to discard for both elements, and it's a little more versatile. You can activate your Earth backup too, so kind of difficult to say.
Well, if you think that's difficult to say, next we have a Mono Legend Edge. I was so happy when I saw this art. I was like, "Yo, this art's fantastic!" And he's a Wind Legend. What does he do? Yep. And then I read him, and I was like, "Wait, what?" And then so I read him again. And I was like, "Well, that's good, right? Or no, is that good?" And then I read him again, and like, I saw quite a bit of debate about this card. I know you were debating with some people too, where some people were like, this card's incredible. And I was kind of like, is it though? Like, I mean, 3 effects is great, but like 2K, okay. 2 cards from Break Zone, okay. Haste, okay, on a 7K body. Like, and then his action ability, clearly incredible to keep replaying anything, but it's also tied to a crystal. Like, I gotta be honest, I'm not feeling this card. Like, I find this incredibly underwhelming. So, do you feel differently, or are you like super high on it? How do you see Edge?
Pretty low on it. I'm just, I never want to cast it. Obviously, I think everyone's on the same page with this. Basically, it's like you don't want to cast it. So, as a win card, not good. As a generic colorless card that you only play off of the crystal effects, basically, it's fine. I think so. You want to play it from the break zone, so it's a little vulnerable. It's vulnerable to cards like Miss Dragon, opposing edges, which is kind of annoying.
Ironically,
Kadaj and stuff like that. So there's and what the demon now is also doing that. So there's that. Now, you can do it at instant speed, but only on your turn, so you're not getting a ton of value out of the break zone removal effect a lot of the time when it works. It is like, some people have like said it's like an infinite haster, right? Where you like pay 2 and a crystal and you get it and you swing in so that when you put them on like a high damage count, you have a way to close out the game. And while that's true, the way that the 4 deck is working, you like, that's just like not a thing. That's like, you're never getting them to like 6 and then hastening them down like a million times. And you never have like 6 crystals. You have like a crystal or 2, and then any other crystals are being spent on Glaciella, basically. So I have mixed feelings about the card. Like, it seems good sometimes, and when it works, I bet it feels really, really good. Like when you get like your opponent forgets about it and casts a Kusith on your turn or whatever. That's obviously gonna feel really good. And I get that, like, you know, it is just like a 7k body that comes in for 2, because you get 2 CP back when, or you get you get the crystal back when Cecil's the water Cecil's on the board. But I'm gonna be honest, after playing it like pretty extensively, I probably played like 10, at least a half dozen, maybe a dozen games on a 4 deck that has Cecil in a deck, because I played like 3 different variants of Harry, but just like playing with the card, I've just not been super impressed with it the way that I thought I was going to be after some people tried to sell me on it. So yeah, I've gone all the way around that already. One day in, it's like I thought it was low impact and probably not worth a slot, to thinking, well, maybe it's just worth a slot as a colorless card, to back to like I kind of just don't want to play it very much. Yeah. So.
Well, I guess we'll see where he ends up. Next, we have our Botanist. At first, I thought this was kind of neat because someone had brought up, oh, this is a perfect card for Une. You know, Une or old Doga backup. You cheat those in because they don't have an entry effect. But then I started thinking, well, hold on, wait a minute. So you've got to pay 3. You've got to have another thing you want to get rid of, and you have to have that card in hand at the time, all on backups, which generally are cards you want to get out as soon as you can. I don't know, man. That's asking a lot to line up. So the more I thought about it, the more I went really south on this card.
Yeah, I don't get it. I'm gonna be honest. I really don't get it. I feel like it's a card that they're like, don't worry, you'll understand it in the future. Yeah. Like, but right now I'm just looking at it and I'm just like, why wouldn't I just cast the Une or the Dogo? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, that's where I am on this one.
Fair enough. How about our spooky little ghost here? I kind of just wrote this off right away because the entry's not much to speak of, but then I thought, choose a monster you control, remove it from the game. I mean, I like the idea of like Typhon coming in for a second shot, and in particular, I like the idea of protecting something. You know, they put in Robel Akbel, they cast Ramu to try to break your Atomos, and haha, surprise. However, generally decks that run those monsters have such tight slots anyway. Can you really afford a slot for the little ghost here? So he's cute, but I don't see him making much of an impact.
Yeah, it is really cool to have this, you know, Renoa delayed blink effects on a monster that only works on monsters. But the ETB is pretty low impact. You have to spend a win to activate it, so you can't just like cheat it in off of Realm or like in a Leo deck or whatever. That's where I was kind of thinking about it, as like Leo. But yeah, you can't really like cheat it in off of anything. It's kind of just it's a really weird card. It's again a card that I think if you can benefit from the 3k ping, like playing like Wind Lightning, and you're like playing all those little chip cards, we're gonna talk about it with Ritz in a bit too, then, you know, maybe you can benefit from this card. But I don't pretend to like understand where we're coming from with this one. It's weird, kind of janky, odd category, like strange combination of effects. So I don't really expect to see a ton of this, but it is cool.
Yeah. Well, now we got to start a theme that's going to go on for the rest of Wind. Apparently, Wind went in and kicked in someone's office. Said they didn't like 13's boot being in their face all last Opus, and they were like, I demand several instances of board-wide damage. Pronto. Well, this is Genova Dreamweaver. It's our first instance. So can't be targeted by summons at all. So Ramu's not killing it. Fenrir's not killing it. That's a lot of monster hate. So that on its own is pretty cool. Then you can just make it its normal body that attacks. And if you can search out and remove another copy, you just 7k the board. Now, currently, this is the only version of this card in play, which means if you're like me, you'll draw all the copies, so it's worthless to you. But if you're an actual good player, you'll fish them out of the deck and then, 7K to the board. How much does that matter to you? Because even if that part doesn't pan out, it's still a monster that just becomes a forward when you need it to, and it's protected from summons. Like, I think that's really big on a monster. Tell me about Genova. He's stunned.
I don't dig it. It's such a weird card again. It's a wind monster. Can't be chosen by summons. Why does it have the text? I guess that's the thematic thing, probably from
maybe, yeah.
Something, I don't know, but 7K wide, good. This whole you must play 3 of them. You have to remove it, so it's got limited usages. And if you draw 2, well, that sucks. Get screwed, I guess. So I don't foresee it. I bet somebody will play it. I bet it's a lot better in L3 specifically, where you're not drawing a million cards basically, because when you're playing wind, you're drawing a million cards. That's just the way it works. But I don't know. I need somebody to show me the way on this card, and then I'll be more into it. As it stands, I'm just I don't want to play it. So
very fair. Next, we have Stiltskin. He's category Crystal Chronicles Moogle, but there's so many good targets for those, especially in Wind. You're playing this if you're planning to do the Chelinka Yuri thing.
Right.
Speaking of which, or do you have more you want to say on it? Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, it's good there. Yep. Obviously. So.
Speaking of which, Chelinka is our next one, and so her and Yuri both have the same effect. You come in, you discard a card, they go grab their best buddy, and then they have a party effect. So Chelinka can just. The damage becomes 0, so essentially the party won't take any damage, even from blockers, which is fantastic. And then Yuri, I think, can break 4 to 4 more and activate everything, which is cool. Yep. It's a cute little combo, and I find them being 9K a lot more appealing than them being 7K. So I want to try it. Clearly, they don't fit in with normal mono win. There's better things that deck could be doing. Would they find a home? That much, I don't know. I mean, it's a cute little 2-card, 3-card combo. I just don't know where it goes necessarily.
Right. I think we're supposed to play the new Chelinka with the old Yuri, the one that came out a few opuses ago. So that one is an untargetable, really, really big body that also gets you a little bit of value every turn. So you can untap 2 backups, or you can untap itself in a backup. So it kind of has pseudo brave in that regard. And when you combine it with Stiltskin and Leo, who we're going to get to in the Earth section, he's huge. He's just a really big, chunky man. And the Chelinka is a little bit more flexible. So you're going to play at least some of these Chelinkas to search out with Yuri or Epitaph or Alaria, or there's a million different cards that you can use to search for the Chelinka, but you're gonna have at least some of those to get the Yuri on the board as quickly as possible. But then I think you can also play more Chelinkas. I think you could potentially play the backup Chelinka even. I don't know if I'm super on board with playing both versions, but you definitely can. It's definitely possible, because they're not going to be able to kill the Yuri, so they're gonna have to kill the Chelinka to get the power of Yuri down. And so when you do, you'll just be able to play more Chelinkas. You can play the multi-Chelinka. I think you can play the very, very first Chelinka we had, because that also has a party attack effect. So that's pretty good. So, I think there's a lot of room to explore with this package. I do not think that this Yuri is the one that we want to play, but I do think we're going to play this Chelinka to get out Yuri.
Yeah, fair enough. Next, we have Chocobo, which is one of my favorite arts in the whole game, and I was so happy that the card effect is so bad, because hopefully it means that the full art will be very cheap, and so I can get it very easily. I just, why can't it be used with Chocobos? It's a Chocobo. I can't pick another Chocobo to let this Chocobo be big? Why is that restriction on there?
Well, it's the thematic restriction, because Chocobos can't ride other Chocobos. It's the whole thing is that the unit is supposed to be riding the Chocobo. That's
fair, I guess. From. Yeah, so I love the art, but I don't see.
They knew we weren't going to play it anyways, so they just put a little thematic restriction on there for fun.
But you know what? If he ate about 1,000 pounds of Geishel greens, maybe we'd play this card.
Yeah.
Just some of the best art in the set with just, what are you looking at? So again, goes in our theme of board wiping our opponent. I'm so curious to know what you think of this one. Surely, for the most part, this is going to cost 7, probably 6. 6 is, as I see, the most common cost. Maybe 5. 5 isn't unreasonable if you get a big enough board. Wind has Luso, right? But Luso does require a lot of parts. This doesn't. This is just, hey, I'm dying to 13 turn 1. Boom, fat chocobo, get out of here. But man, it is expensive. But it's also, it's not limited to your turn. You can do it on their turn. Like, I don't know. I don't know what to think of this. What do you think of the fatty?
Okay, everyone has... Okay, I lied. Nobody has tried to sell me on this card, but everybody has tried to tell me that this card is good. And I do not see it. I literally think that this card is just like straight garbage, and I can't figure it out. I understand that you can cast it on your opponent's turn. I understand that Wind really, really wants AoE. I understand that it only hits your opponent's stuff. And I think it's garbage. Like, I can't get it. Like, why would I do this when I could just cast a bunch of stuff, get a bunch of free stuff, and play Luso, right? If it was searchable with Chocobo Sam or Izana, I could get it a little bit more, like, it is really, really good at saying, like, in a close match between Wind and something else, your opponent, it just shuts your opponent out of the game. I do, like, really, really get that. It works against, like, all of these sorts of, water, earth, stuff like that. It's like very good in these kind of strategies, but it's so expensive and it's so like it's so overkill when it works. I think is really what it is. The only thing that I really, really see for this is you can cast this card off of Leo. That is really cool. Like a one-sided board, one-sided board wipe off of Leo is really, really cool. Now, how many of these am I going to put in my Leo deck? I don't really know. But, it is neat that they keep adding these really, really big payoff cards. I really don't see it. I don't think I'm ever going to cast this for 5. Like, if I have 9 characters on the board...
You should be winning.
I am so far ahead that who cares if I can cast the Patrick Bow for 9. I'm probably realistically casting it for 6, 7, or just straight up 8. And am I satisfied when I'm doing it? Hell no! I don't want to kill my opponent's Vanilla and Hope for like 8 cost. Like, how far behind am I willing to get in a deck that needs to play like a bunch of cards to be able to do anything? So I am not saying this. Like I have learned my lesson a little bit. Like you can play cards that are anti-synergistic with your deck if it adds a new dimension. But like, okay. Now you want me to play this card instead of Yuffie? Like, no. Like, if I'm really, really desperate for anti-aggro and Wind, why would I just not play Yuffie? And I get maybe this is an anti-aggro card, but I can't figure it out. Somebody show me the power again.
Show us the true reality of the fatty. Well, while they're figuring that out, we'll move on to Nash. Searchable by Nordstalin, which is never bad. Pretty easy to get his first effect on, too, in the sense that Wind is just going to be casting a bunch of stuff anyway. Granted, his targets are, at least based on the last meta, a little limited. Tyro comes to mind and Shantoto. I don't know if you want to be breaking a Shantoto, especially with Althea gone now. But I do like the fact that he can just break any backup, period, if you needed that. So I like the idea of, hey, Rosa effect on the stack, dull everything out, break your backup. Now I get my backups anyway. Surely, probably at least just a one of, right? Or do you see him bigger than that?
Oh yeah, no, I'll just plop one of them and everything. You got a few more slots now with Althea leaving the pool, so I'm just gonna plop an Ash and basically everything and not think too much about it. But it's really funny that it's a mandatory effect. So I could see a lot of people accidentally breaking their own Fat Chocobo with this card. That would be a big oopsie. But I do foresee that happening at least once throughout the set. I hope it's not to me. I hope it's to my opponent. But that's probably going to happen. So just straightforward. Good card.
Yep. Next, number 128. I like this guy a lot, so his special is obviously great. Again, another 7k to your opponent's board, and it can't be reduced for some reason. That I thought was a fire thing, but apparently it's a wind thing now. He can also do it for free with his wind effect. Of course, he needs a very specific condition, so it kind of makes me wonder if maybe you put this guy in, like, wind fire. I kind of like the idea of, like, Brynhildering him. Hey, in case you finish him off anyway, I still draw a card, but also kind of like Magissa, and I'm just going to hit your board with it as well. So
yeah,
I really like him. Yeah, I don't think he probably fits in Mono Wind so much, but I really like the idea of him in Windfire.
Yeah, this was a card that I think we definitely would have enjoyed having access to in Mono Wind, but I just don't like it. I'm so confused about how I'm supposed to turn it on. The only way that I can really see turning this on is that like those like fire pangs, Ifrit and stuff like that. But also kind of struggle with the whole idea that like, well, if I'm playing Fire Wind, then like, am I really struggling with clearing the board? Like when I have all of these extra effects, it's probably not bad there regardless. And maybe there's something along the line that I'm not able to see right now where, hey, this it's actually really, really easy to get 4K onto this guy. And if that ends up being the case, then I'm into it,
Yep.
But doesn't have a particularly relevant category for the element and the kind of thing that it's doing, so weird.
Yeah.
Again.
Next we have Nono, who just looks like he came back from a night of drinking. He's like, hey, what are you doing? If you were still playing the Opus 10 Barts, I know like Matiski had it in one of his wind lists. This is a clear upgrade over it. It's pretty much the same card if you're in Mono Wind, but it also gets that end of turn effect. Obviously great on a burst. It also a Moogle, so can be searched out through Moogle means. Some people started using the Google Moogle again. Do you think this will show up in a lot of Mono Winds, or do you think maybe they're not looking for this? How do you see Nono?
I've had people try to sell me on this one, and I don't get it. You can Chucklemog it out. Sure, that's great. But like that, we have no shortage of good Chucklemog targets, and I'm not sure that this one is really an upgrade in any regard. So I'm a little inclined to poo-poo this card. I'm not really into it. I think that if we wanted this, like we would have been playing Barts and Mono Wind a long time ago, and we didn't have the room for that. Like it's just not worth the slot. I guess the only like big boon that we have for this now is hey, Bismarck's coming back, so maybe activating all of your stuff is useful at some point. I could see it as like a one of, but in terms of just like as a normal backup, it's pretty poor compared to the other options that are out there. So I think it's more of like if we do see it, it's a combo piece kind of thing.
Fair enough. Well, it sounds like you want more backups. Here we have Prompto, which, I was thinking about this card with retainers, and I was like, well, did any of the retainers care about, like, how many retainers you have? Oh, there's one. Oh, but it's Prompto. It's a forward Prompto. He's the one who wants to see them all. But he does fit with, like, the new Ignis, because he can put backups into the break zone. So I kind of like him. But again, then, like, if you're playing the retainers, aren't you putting him forward? Because I don't know. I don't know if you would just generically put him in a win deck. Like, the protection effect is fine, and then you do draw off of it. So I don't know. Maybe that's enough on its own. Like, I kind of... It's hard for me to see him outside of retainers. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that this is basically just a backup option for retainers, which is good. Don't get me wrong, because, like, Ignis really... The new Ignis really, really wants to see... backups enter the break zone, so it's got nice synergy with that. Also, this Ignis was one of the less interesting retainers that we had, and now that you have another forward option to search for that also still works with the Noctis pretty well, and a backup option that works with it, and Prompto is maybe not so useful compared to the other retainers. I could see something happening here. Like, do I have a clear image for what this is going to look like as a deck? Absolutely not. I have no idea. Like, maybe you play, like, Earth, Wind, Lightning, Rampare, and, Ignis is, like, super cool. Like, just hacking off all these backups, doing all this cool stuff, and you draw a bunch of extra cards, or maybe it just doesn't do anything. Like, it's really hard to figure it out. The idea of, like, having this kind of anti-aggro approach in a deck where value is your primary win condition is like a nice and interesting prospect. We saw retainers plus Yuffie, kind of like you had too much anti-aggro and not enough ways to win the game, and this one kind of gives you a little bit more flexibility in figuring out how you're actually going to win the game instead of just playing dudes. So So I do think it's good there, but again, I have no concrete idea of like what
Sure.
this is supposed to look like in the end.
Yeah, well said though. Next, we have a card I was very happy to see. This is Beldat, and I was like, oh, they didn't forget about the warp thing. So this is a card that does reward you every time a warp counter is removed. It's only 2 turns, and it's only a single wind. And then, you get a little bitty mill action. They've always very gently pushed that on, like, the thief job. And then... at first, when I read this, I thought she was busted. So you pick a forward in your opponent's break zone, and you get to cast. And I was like, oh my god, you could just steal their Leviathan Lord of the World and go, oh, it's mine now. However, someone did point out that, unlike Zidane, which lets you cast it for any color, she doesn't actually color fix you. So, like, let's say you're putting her in mono wind, or I don't know, wind fire. If you steal an earth card, okay, well, you can't cast it anyway. So that definitely cooled my excitement for her. Because again, if I was like, that's insane, you could just steal their best card, I was like, oh, okay, maybe not. So, however, maybe then, I don't know, where does she go? Maybe she goes in an earth wind deck where you will have the color fixing, so you can make sure you cast it. Because that sounds pretty crazy if you can steal their demon or their whatever. So, cool card, I like it. It was nice to see that they did remember the warp removal thing.
Yep, cool card. We're never going to be able to cast it, and so because we're never going to be able to cast it, the card goes from, like, if it color fix you, card's like 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
The fact that it can't color fix you, like 3 out of 10. Now it's like so much worse at that point. I thought it was like, I had to read it like 3 times. I was like, isn't this just like Zidane, but like better? Yeah. Like, we get to choose what we say. We get to steal Warrior of Light. That's just like so broken, right? It's like, but not like so close, but no cigar. It is cool. Again, yeah, maybe there's the Earth, maybe you're a Tyro, maybe you're a 4-color Warrior of Light, and you can potentially get some value out of this when mirrors become like really, really popular, or something, or maybe wind is just really, really good, and you expect to see a lot of wind in that. We had the Zidane Wars, whereas this, you just steal all of your opponent's cards you could possibly steal. Beldat would be, more of the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a lot less playable than Zidane, I think, but it's not impossible that we see it. I just don't expect it.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, we know that sin must be balanced with suffering. My favorite quote from the goddess in the 14 fight with her. I love the art on this card. I hope we get a full art one day, because I wish you could. You can kind of just barely see it, but there's this like face or like head she's writing on, which is covered up by the text, unfortunately. But man, beautiful, beautiful art. It is 7 cost, 9K. How good is it? Well, the final effect is great, where it removes your entire opponent's break zone. Wind doesn't really have anything like that, other than like a white mage here or there, but that is huge. It does give a new angle to wind, and it is technically a board wipe, but it's a delayed board wipe. And like if you're in a position that you need to wipe your opponent's board, I don't think you can afford to be like, okay, take a whole nother turn and then, because like surely they're just gonna suicide in with all their forwards, right? Like, oh, these are all gonna die, okay, I'll just hit you as much as I can. So like, I'm not too big on that. I mean, would you pay 7 just to keep their break zone empty? I guess it would cripple some decks. So like, I want to love this card because it just looks cool and it seems unique, but I kind of have this sneaking suspicion that there's just too much of a letdown on here. How do you see the goddess?
I pretty low on this card. I think like the mechanics behind it just don't really work, especially when you like look at this next to demon and like see how much worse it is like immediately, right? So, but it is wind, and wind does need all of these board players. It needs anything that it can get. So I agree, it's probably not good enough most of the time, but it still might be good enough just to play one of, or whatever. I don't really see it. I don't think we would play this in, like, for example, mono wind. I think that it's just like way too bad for that. Like, if Fat Chocobo isn't doing it, waiting a whole extra turn is not doing it. Like, I'm not really super into that part. But maybe the break zone removal is just good enough. And I do think this type of removal tends to work against decks like Ice Lightning and stuff like that, where like Weiss is just sticking around on the turn after turn for like so many, like, and you can just empty your hand and do it, and like they can kill it, sure they can get a little bit of advantage back, but it is going to work. Like, there's no way around it. So against like water, against mono fire stuff where like the forwards are nice and cheap, not so hot. Against these kind of like mid-range decks that are kind of slow, playing a lot of 4CP 8Ks and stuff like that. That's where I think it's going to be a little bit more viable. But even then, maybe a 1, maybe a 0. You have to see kind of thing.
Someone show me the light with the goddess, or show me it with everyone's favorite Final Fantasy VII character, Melfi. Everyone remember Melfi, the great character Melfi? God, did this character get teased a lot when it got revealed? Everyone's like, who is this? Like, I don't even know who this person is. We did get a new Sonin to go with her, although he doesn't really strike me as better than like the old EX Burst Sonin. He is Earth, of course. You don't have those dual elements. I'll be honest, I actually thought this was a backup, and then I was like, oh, right, it's a forward. So if you really got to have that Sonin, you can get this card. I don't really see a place for this other than maybe L3. How do you see it?
Yeah, I'm not super into it. I mean, the other Sonin, it like gets pretty good stats when the Melfi is in the break zone, but the Melfi doesn't put herself into the break zone until like later, and you have to have a target. So like if everything lines up, it seems okay. So that means when everything doesn't line up, it's pretty bad. Like, that's kind of where I am with it. It's never bad to have these kinds of like search chains in L3 or even in standard. But I don't think this one is on the power levels required to see play in standard. Be pretty surprised if it was in L3 too.
Yeah. Carpenter, there's the Win version. We talked about those earlier. Yuri, I think we said most of what we wanted to say on Yuri. The only thing I'll add is, again, you can grab backup Chelinka, which is just awesome. Anything else you want to add?
Right. Nope. Pretty good.
All right. And then here we have Yuffie, which is so for big 5-cost Yuffie, you would always load up with all these little Yuffies that you never wanted to play. You just used them for Doom of the Living. Well, here we have a Yuffie that I actually wouldn't mind playing if I had to. And it's still a 2-cost, so it can still be recurred off of Asura as well, which is great. So, like, you're instantly replacing some of those old ones with this one. Yeah, and just the 8k damage was just so much more than I was expecting. Like, as I was reading the effect, ping them for 3. That's what the Edge used to do. No, 8k is get something off the board.
It's pretty big,
Yeah, so if your 5 costs get hit into damage, or they get removed, or they get dealt with, there's a lot worse Yuffies you could be putting on the board than this young lady.
Yeah, I do not hate this one at all. The Shuriken counterpart is good and everything. I don't expect us to be playing like ninjas at this point, but I did consider briefly, because it's very cute with Cisne as well with the the Shuriken counters. I did briefly consider an Ice Wind with just playing all the ninja stuff, like the really old Edge, and then just play like mono win ninjas with Cisne and good Ice Wind cards. And it doesn't look that bad, surprisingly. Like, you have a lot of anti-aggro options, you have a lot of swarming options, and Sid Haze and Locke, those are pretty good cards still. And you don't have to do like 7 casts or anything like that. You can just get enough value off of a couple of casts every turn, and having these good cards. But I think that this one is basically an upgrade over the 1 CP Yuffie that we were playing before. It's vaguely playable. Really wish we had a good way to give it haste, but beggars can be choosers for there. And small side note, great for L3, because now you actually have S ability potential for Yuffie, which we didn't have before.
And our final new card is Ritz, a card that maybe it's just copium for me and I'm trying to find a use for it. But I did genuinely, the one thing I thought of is, again, I kind of still want to make Fire Wind a deck, take advantage of that Zidane. And I did think, if you Brynhildred something and hit it with this Ritz, you've paid 3 and you're drawing 2 cards off of that, and you leave a body behind. Not a good body by any means, but it is a body. It's something that can block or attack. So in that specific scenario, I actually really like her quite a bit. Beyond that, I don't know what you would use it for.
I'm cautiously optimistic about this one, I guess is what I would say. Is I think that 3K is pretty small. Which is, it's that's whatever. 3K is pretty small, but, ping damage is looking to be a little bit better than it was before. We have a lot of Wind Lightning synergies coming in. We have Fusoya in that deck that is searchable off of said Paladin and stuff. Like, you can search this off of Stiltskin, obviously very good. And Stiltskin has no shortage of good search options, don't get me wrong. But, it is an option. You could just play like 1 or 2 of it, and it works. In Wind Lightning specifically, you have like the old Ramu that has to deal damage a damage forward. So you can deal 7k to damage forward or something like that. There's all sorts of different little options there that work with the Ritz that, surprisingly pretty cute. And I'm not sure this is going to make the cut in mono win. In fact, I'd be pretty surprised if it did. But Bismarck's coming back. Hey, like 3K ping is actually a little bit better when it you combine it to a 5K. Also, if you do you have Lulu on the board, you play Ritz, you cast Chocobo, you play Ritz again, you set something to 5K, you do a 6, and you get to draw 2 off of that, plus the Chocobo is going to draw 1. And so I actually think it looks a little underwhelming, but you start to think about it and it's like, well, if you have the support spot, you can't just play it in the same mono win you always did before, probably. But if you play any amount of support for it, it actually looks pretty good.
Awesome. Yeah, good. I love that Chocobo Lulu line. I'm going to have to try that out. That's fantastic. And then the last one's the Crystal Dragoon. So, folks, that is it for Fire, Ice, Wind. Jared, thank you so much for joining me on here. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back soon with the last 3 elements, which is Earth, Lightning, Water, and we'll wrap up with those Light and Dark. So, Jared, I will see you on the next one.
Yep.
Take care.
See ya.